Thank you, John. So we're really lucky to have Natalie Featherston with us today, and she's got quite the reputation. So she does trompe l'oeil, and so she's going to tell you all about that. And that's an example of her work there. And I said, do a lot of people want to, touch it to see if it's real or not? And she said there's that temptation, but she doesn't want you to touch it. The Chicago Times described her paintings as artful beyond just illusion and trickery. They are truly masterful still lifes made with both craft and wit. So I think you'll find when you see more of her work that she puts a lot of thought into it. Glad that you all came out. Sometimes on a cold winter night, it's hard to get a crowd, but she's worth it. She has work in various collections, and she's been in Spain last week, and then before that in the Southwest. So her work is displayed widely around the world. And this was interesting to me. She has paintings and collections who are owned by Toni Morrison, Danielle Steele, J.J. Abrams, and Alice Cooper. So I thought we know somebody who has paintings owned by those people. I'm going to let her talk about her work, and she has an interesting set of slides about trompe l'oeil. And I have to keep reminding myself how to say it, even though I speak a little tiny bit of French. But anyway, so I'm going to let her talk, and we will probably have a short, very, very short break in the middle, and then you can get up and socialize some more and have some refreshments. And so without further ado, please greet and welcome Natalie Featherston.
Thank you, Naomi, and thanks so much for inviting me to come and talk to you. Like, to have a captive audience for an hour listening to me talk about myself, I love that. Just want to, if I can, we're gonna spin that around so I can see what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm getting that.
Okay. I live in Providence now. I'm not from Providence. I sort of ended up here by default. I grew up in the South and moved to New Jersey. I lived in New York City for many years, and my husband got a job in Providence. So we moved, and I really love being up here. It's been a change for me from New Jersey. New Jersey, where I was sort of like an art desert. So I love being up here, and I'm part of the Providence Art Club in Providence. So like the whole art club thing, I'm very into all that.
I actually moved the slide, but anyway.
This is new for me. So, am I in the right spot for whatever's happening with the Zoom and all that?
Yeah.
We're good. Okay. All right. Today, I just wanted to talk a little about what trompe l'oeil is, what it isn't, what characterizes it. I wanted to talk about my work, other trompe l'oeil artists, both like from history, contemporary painters. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about my studies and training and process. That's something that I always find really interesting when I meet other artists, is like, how do they make their art? So I have a whole section on that too. But to start off with, I wanted to talk about the origin story of trompe l'oeil. Most people don't know this, but like it goes back to like 5 BC. It is an old thing, like where we make stuff to fool the eye. I found this really cool engraving. It started off as a painting competition between these two guys named Zeuxis and Pherecyus. So there's a painting competition, and Zeuxis has come and he's made a painting over here of grapes, and it's so realistic that the crows are swooping down to pick the grapes. And you can see the crows, they're like having a party over there. Meanwhile, things are getting really wild. There's like a guard, everybody's very upset, they're charging this other painting. Well, Zeuxis thinks he's won, because obviously the crows are picking the grapes off the painting, like he's won. His friend Pherecyus has shown up with a painting, and it's draped by a curtain. And he's like, you got to pull that curtain back, like my victory is imminent. I win. Well, he runs over the painting to pull the curtain back, and ta-da, it's painted. So that is the whole thing about how trompe l'oeil started. It was actually a painting competition. But what I think is so funny about this story is these are tropes and motifs that you will still see today in trompe l'oeil painting. People are still painting grapes and curtains, which I think is really, really neat. But it is a very old style of painting. Whoop.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've made a minor mistake.
And those are the grapes. This is from Boulie. This is a French painter. Okay. Can I advance the next one?
Yes, you can advance the next one. It's just the people aren't seeing it because I forgot to step.
Okay, I'll wait until you get that up.
You mean the Zoom audience? Can't see it?
Right.
I'll ask a question.
right.
Did you come to this after other
Yes.
subjects?
Oh, I got a whole thing on that.
All
I
right,
don't want to
don't
miss the
think
surprise.
All right, I don't think I'm seeing this.
Ah, there we go. This is another one of my favorite paintings of all time. This kind of goes back to the whole curtain motif. I got to see this recently at the Met as part of their Cubism and Trompe exhibition, which was amazing. This was actually painted by two different guys. Adrian Vanderstelt was a floral painter. He did the flowers, and his buddy Frans van Mieris did the curtain. And they actually joined a Dutch painting guild right around the same time. So we know that they were friends, and 10 years later, they did this collaboration. Me personally, I love the curtain. Like that's my favorite part of this painting. But I just thought that was really neat because these are still things that you see today in Trompe painting. And one thing people ask me a lot is, what's the difference in Trompe between just something that's realistic and something that's Trompe? Sometimes people will even be like, oh, it's a technique. It's not a technique. I mean, it's just straight up painting the same way you would paint anything else. There's not a special technique. But what is special about it is the design. There's a difference. Like this is a still life painting I did of apples. And while you might look at that and be like, well, it's very realistic, right? I'm not trying to get you to feel like you can pluck the apple out of there. It's just a very realistic painting of apples, but it also has some depth to it. You know, it does move back into the picture plane. You know, it feels like a very representational still life. Whereas this painting, and this is the same painting, I've just expanded this so you can see the sides. It's just this one box. This is definitely designed for you to feel like you can pull the apple out of the box. This is maybe not the best example for Trompe. I mean, Trompe generally is characterized like the piece that I brought today, which is flat, you know, where it's a very narrow depth of field. It's very strong cast shadow. It's flat, it's life size. That's another thing that I think is really important when we're going to define what Trompe is. I see a lot of very hyper-realistic paintings of giant things. Technically, this is not Trompe. Like you really want to feel like you can pick it up. And if the donut is the size of like a Mack truck wheel, no. Like I'm not, you're not selling me that that's a donut. So that's another thing as far as what makes something Trompe. Really is that narrow depth of picture plane. Another thing that I find really interesting is why people like it. Like even people who don't like realism generally will like Trompe. And I think there's two reasons for this. One is like the way our brains process art, you know, how we filter that experience. And there is a little shift that happens when something is really well painted where you think it's not paint and then you realize it is. There's this moment in perception shift. This is actually why I do Trompe. Like that for me to engage with somebody that way and kind of like have that switch flip. I love that. I mean, that for me, that's the whole reason. But I think also it's virtuosity. I think people can appreciate that even if they don't necessarily like representational painting, they can appreciate a level of virtuosity that it takes to pull that off. So I think that's kind of why people enjoy Trompe. So I'm going to just share a couple of my favorite painters with you. This is by no means like the best. These are just ones I like. But this guy's one of my favorites, Cornelis Giesbrechts. Obviously a Dutch, and he did a lot, you know, this is a letter rack with a draped curtain, which is something that you see a lot in his work. The curtains actually were used to protect paintings. You know, back in the day, there was probably like dirt and hay and candle wax and God knows what else. So, you know, I mean, like we talk a lot about varnishing these days about how you get topography from getting into your varnish film, but I can only imagine what a nightmare it would have been back in like 1650. But he did a lot of paintings like this. He was best known for his still life and vanitas paintings, and he was the court painter for the royal family. But he also did Trompe. And back in the day, I mean, I think things have changed now, but one thing that I've found a lot in reading about Trompe, it was kind of like the bastard child nobody talked about. It was like, you know, you had like allegorical painting and history painting and figure painting and landscape and still life. And then the dirty thing nobody talked about was Trompe. It was just considered like a cheap joke. But he did a lot of these. In fact, he was one of the first guys that I know of that did inverso paintings. There's a very fancy Dutch word for this. I'm not going to even try to pronounce it. I just say inverso, but it's where it's the back of a painting. And what I love about this one is he would make these and put them out in his studio as jokes. So people would come over to see his new, like, big paintings, everything, and he would put them on the floor against the wall. And people would think, oh, he's put this painting on the floor and turn against the wall, pick it up and turn it around and see what it is. And I assure that in 1650, this was hilarious. This was like the height of, I'm probably gonna get any funnier than that. But I found out that this painting is still displayed that way in a gallery in the Netherlands. Like they actually have it on the floor as Kieschbeck would have had it in his studio, which I think is hilarious.
Is that whole thing, sorry, is that whole thing a canvas that we're looking at, or which is the painting?
It's all painted.
The whole thing is.
Yeah, the whole thing is painted. And I just love this too, because you can see all the little nails and the linen and like just the detail that I just love. This is another piece of his, and I wish you guys could see this. I saw this live at the National Gallery. They did a huge Trompe show back in the 90s. That thing is as big as me and it's cut out. It's 3-dimensional. So it is a life-size easel with a curtain and a huge still life painting and another inverso turned against, you know, the easel, the maul stick, the palette. I've got a little close-up of this. He's got a little self-portrait of himself. It just, this is amazing. If you ever have a chance to see this live and in person, I mean, the fact that it's even survived being a cut out piece of art like this just blows my mind. So anyway, he's the guy. He's my favorite. Another man that we have to talk about is Louis Boulley, who is French, and he did a lot of different kinds of work. He also did trompe-l'oeil in addition to figure painting, portraits, that sort of stuff. And again, I wanted to show you the grapes because for me, that's like classic Boulley. He was also known to do, now this is the real frame, but this is the painted part. So he's painted he'll do engravings and sketches under glass, which I absolutely love. But one of the reasons that we call it trompe-l'oeil is because of Boulley's work. That was sort of the art critics of the time coined his paintings as fool the eye. And because they were art critics in France, they used a French term for it. So that's where trompe-l'oeil came from. Even though it's been around for several centuries, we can actually blame the art critics in France in about 1850 for that. And I included this one just because I thought it was so weird. Like, it's the back of a canvas, but there's like a cat and a log and some sardines. And I'm like, I really don't know what's going on here. It's not attractive, but it is the back of a canvas and I love those. So I tacked that in. I thought you guys might get a kick out of that. There are 4 American painters that I want to talk about that I absolutely love. David Scott Evans is really more of an obscure, you don't hear a lot about this guy. He grew up in Indiana and moved to New York and studied all different kinds of places. He ended up going to Paris and studying with Bouguereau for a while. He was actually a figure painter. I know, I was like, oh my God, Bouguereau, I love Bouguereau. He was known to do just large portraits of women, sort of like in the landscape, very Bouguereau-esque. This was like his dirty secret. A matter of fact, a lot of paintings, they for a long time weren't even sure that they were his because he didn't sign them with his name. This one he signed SS David, and we know his name is David Scott Evans. So like he wouldn't even put his name on them. This one actually is up in Boston. One of my favorite pieces with the broken glass, the free sample take one. He died tragically very young crossing the Atlantic on a steamer going back to Paris. So just his life was really cut short, which is a shame. This is another one that I love with this pet parrot. And again, he didn't put his name on it. He just signed it DSE. So I love that guy. William Harnett. We absolutely cannot talk about trompe-l'oeil without talking about Harnett. I mean, he's probably the modern father of trompe-l'oeil. He was born in Ireland and his parents brought him over when he was an infant during the potato famine. They settled in Pennsylvania and he went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Art. He went to the National Academy of Design, studied a lot in New York. And again, like these, I mentioned this before, but these are life size. I mean, these are big paintings. These are not tiny, tiny little things. This one is in the American Wing at the Met has a lot of his work. And they're absolutely amazing to see up close. You know, to see how the sheet music is painted and the rosin on the violin bridge and the whole thing. They are absolutely remarkable. This one is something that I show a lot of my students. This is the Faithful Cult. And what I love about this, when you see it in person, is how the text on that feels very texty, but like you can't actually read it. You know, it's sort of, it's this weird pivot in between abstraction and legibility, which I just think is masterful the way he does that. This is After the Hunt. This is huge. I mean, this is like a setup on an entire door. These are just magnificent to see in person. This is Sunday Dinner, which I love this. I could not find a slide, but I have seen several different painters do a modern take on this with a rubber chicken. Which I have that on a list somewhere, is like rubber chicken. This is another one of his old violin that I absolutely love. He used a lot of the same props, so you know, throughout his career, but he's the guy. A letter rack, which I love as well. John F. Bateau was a contemporary of Harnitz. They actually went to school together at the Pennsylvania Academy. He ended up moving to Island Heights, New Jersey, and sort of spent the rest of his career there painting. And they now have a Bateau Museum, which is a beautiful museum, and I've been lucky enough to show there. And you can see his work is very much informed by Harnett, very contemporaries. And again, this is a very classic example of trompe l'oeil, where it's a very narrow picture plane and all the objects are characterized by very strong cast shadow. A letter rack, an old violin. Haberel is the third one. He was actually from New Haven, Connecticut, and worked as an illustrator for a while, and eventually made his way to New York and the National Academy of Design and was introduced to trompe l'oeil. So this is one of his paintings, The Bachelor's Chest, that I absolutely love. And, you know, if you look closer, you can see, you know, a lot of things that talk about the bachelor lifestyle and what that was about versus like how to name baby. It's sort of a dichotomy of ideas in this chest, but it's just incredibly well done. He was investigated by the Treasury Department for forgery. They made it very clear that he should make sure that he stayed working on canvas. But they're quite good. He's incredibly skilled painter. And this one I love too. I'm going to show you a contemporary painter here that's doing something similar with string and wrapping. But I think they're just very funny and very whimsical. So I did want to show you a couple contemporary trompe l'oeil painters that I like. Again, this is just people I like. Your list may vary, but it's interesting to me that people are still continuing to make this type of work. This is Anthony Machulis, and you cannot really talk about trompe l'oeil without talking about Anthony Machulis. He was, in my opinion, one of the greatest painters around. Technically, I think he's unmatched. He's very well known for painting currency. I think he's also been threatened by the Treasury Department. But anyway, he lives in northeastern Pennsylvania and teaches and lectures and does all kinds of stuff. He also has several schools all over the world that he does with a financier, and they are free. Like, they're scholarships to teach kids how to paint, which is very cool. But he's amazing. Really, I think probably one of the greatest trompe l'oeil painters there is. This is Leah Ju, and she is Korean American and actually lives in Connecticut. And this is a series that she's been working on of fabric that's draped. And of course, these are flat, even though they look like they're being draped inside of a box. She had a show in New York a couple of years ago called the Farisius Paintings. That was all draped fabric. And I was like, yeah. So I love that. I thought that was very cool. She's just a brilliant painter. I have never seen this man's work in person. Like, I just have to like give you an asterisk on that. His name is Robin Ely. He, I think, was originally from England and then moved to Australia and now is working in LA. He's a young guy. These are flat, but he builds a compound and sculpts the outsides. So the outside is like a cutout and then paints it so it looks like it's wrapped. So in other words, that's like a three-dimensional shape around the outside, like a cutout panel, kind of like that one that I showed you, Giesbrecht, with the easel with the cutouts, kind of that same idea that it's on a shaped panel. I have not gotten to see these, but I really want to see them. I think they're super cool. Yeah, super cool. So he's very interesting. And I wanted to show you Sharon Moody. Sharon Moody has painted for years. She's had just an incredible career. She shows in Moselle in New York. She's done some incredible stuff. She does comic books and they're just masterful to me. And I also really enjoy the whole kind of gender thing that she brings to that, where she's like sort of this woman painting comic book. Like I like her play on that. But just incredibly skilled painter. And I always love seeing her work. So about me. I used to be a cellist before I started painting. I had like this very weird experience growing up where I started playing the cello when I was a little kid. I went away to performing arts high school. I never lived at home past like 14. I was just gone touring. I moved to New York. It was a very weird way to grow up. I mean, I will say that. So once I got to New York, I kind of realized I was going to spend the rest of my life sitting in an orchestra, and I was already pretty bored with that. And so I just dropped the whole thing, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. Everybody thought I'd lost my mind. And I ended up starting to take art classes, just nighttime adult CE art classes at the School of Visual Arts, because they let anybody in. Like if you could write them a check, you could come take an art class. So that's how I got involved with that. And I just sort of ended up studying at different places. I was at the National Academy of Design. I was at the Art Students League for a while. I did a couple of private apprenticeships, and then I finally met my teacher where I actually learned how to draw and paint. But I did have a whole other career. And so I meet people all the time and they're like, well, you know, I'm kind of doing this other thing and I'd like to paint. I'm like, you can change your mind. Like you can switch over, like, trust me on this. When I first got out of school, I was doing a lot of this kind of stuff, still very still lifey, very inspired by Fenton Latour, who is one of my favorite painters. A lot of fruit and flowers, this kind of thing, which I always enjoy painting, and I still enjoy painting fruit and flowers. But I kind of realized over time, like, I figured I'd already kind of really screwed my life up. You know, I'd already like left like a career and a job to like become a painter. And I thought, you know, I really should just go all in. So over time, you know, I started doing stuff that was more narrative, a little more different. This is called Cinderella's Story, and it's really blown out in this image, but that's a lottery ticket in the front with like a plastic glass slipper. But little by little, I start getting more Trompe elements that kind of come into my work. This is Dutch Treat, which is sort of an allegory of the Dutch settlers in Manhattan, with Lower Manhattan there. And I find that I really like this. Like, I like the whole Trompe effect. This was a very pivotal piece for me that I did. This was like in the very late 90s. Yeah. It's a long story about where I found this sign. But if you read through it, it just says bullshit, bullshit, bullshit over and over again. And when you get to the last line, it says, if you can read this, you're too damn close. And for me, I was like, oh, I think I have found what I'm supposed to do. I'm like, that's funny. You know, because something that really informs my work is humor and narrative and whimsy. You know, it's like, I want to make those paintings. I don't want to, so anyway, that was a very pivotal painting for me. Another series that I've done for many years is children's drawings. This was the very first one I ever did, which I think was like maybe 2001 or 2000. But I love doing these. Like, I just love the whole crayon thing, the texture, everything with the paper. Lately I've been doing more collage work, and I really love these. I'm going to just kind of flip through these really quick, but I actually build all these collages, you know, in life. I pin them up on the wall and then I paint from them. And I do have like a little video of that coming up. But to me, these are super fun because it really gives me a chance to explore narrative and even to kind of paint the figure in a weird way, which I'm not a figure painter. But I get to incorporate the figure and also textures and colors and things like that. The storytelling in these are really important to me, and I really enjoy it. This is the one that Alice Cooper has, in case you were wondering. Hearts are wild creatures, that's why our ribs are cages, which I really loved building that. This is another one of Sugar Skulls. This is a very large piece. And people always ask me, they're like, so what do you do with the collage when you're done? Well, I cannibalize them. One, I have like this one poor mermaid that's been in like 6 paintings, but she's perfect. And like I made her with little brads so I can move her arms and legs around. But some of them, early on when I was making these, I had collectors that had asked me, they're like, well, we would like the collage. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I went over to their house maybe a year or two later just to hang out. And they had framed the collage and hung it right next to the painting. And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't anticipate that. We're not gonna do that anymore. So I don't let them out of my studio anymore, because I have this horrible feeling that like 100 years from now, there's gonna be a show and they're gonna be like, oh, we have all the paintings next to the collages, which that is not what this is about. Like, I think that just devalues the art experience.
Okay. Now we have,
A video.
now we have a video and I have to fiddle around, so.
So it's like a short break.
No, it's not that long, but,
Well, we do have a cello in the other.
Oh no, I went out at like Muhammad Ali at the top of my game. Yeah, I don't think I can even tune one now, honestly. Oh.
see, you can see it, but I have to now move it over to here so that people can see it.
Okay, cool.
Want me to start at the beginning again?
It's fun. So this is a video, just a quick little video that shows, maybe we should start it over. This kind of shows my collage, how I build these things.
And I can't, it's hard to move the mouse over there. Whoops, that was dumb. Where's the mouse? There you are, mouse. Okay. Now we're gonna start over. No, that's media 10, that's the wrong one. I'm sorry, this,
You know what, if the videos are gonna be tricky, we can skip them.
well,
It's
they'll
okay.
be less tricky when I get the hang of it.
So this is collage. This is kind of how I set these up. I actually do make all these little pieces in there, like the guitars. I move everything around. I made a bunch of chihuahuas because I wasn't sure like how big of a chihuahua I needed. And I will leave these set up for several weeks. I mean, I usually have one or two kind of cooking in the corner of the studio, just switching things out. Once I glue them down, I'm done. I don't change anything. But working up to that, I will keep something cooking for a long time. Sometimes they come together really quickly and sometimes they don't. I had one that I kind of played around with for years before I finally figured out what I was gonna do. And we were gonna show another video.
Okay, go to the next one.
Let's go to the next one. This is new for me, dropping in video clips. I did not make it easy. I had hoped that this was gonna be seamless.
Well, it's not just.
So this is how I set it up in my studio. I actually have it hanging on a wall that I painted that weird green gray color that I like. And the video pulls back and you can see just sort of a close-up pan around of what's going on in the painting. And there's so much fun to do. I mean, I just, for me, my favorite thing was the chihuahua. I was like, I think I'm gonna make the whole painting so I can put a chihuahua in there. And then you can see that really is how I have my whole, everything set up.
Now.
I think that was it. I think we're back to a
Yeah, yeah, no, we
regular,
got
regular pro.
regular here for a while.
So it's funny because you actually do it from life, essentially. And for something that with that level of precision, it would be so easy to take a photograph of it.
I have a bunch of reels coming up about that. I probably am an outlier a little bit that I do paint from life. I know most people that are doing high definition work do work from photos, and I am all for photos. I'm not anti-photo. Like I have whatever you're comfortable with, whatever helps you get it. Yeah, that's the next one. Thank you.
Oops.
But for me, I think the thing about working from photos, I'm going to talk about my teacher here in a minute, but he had this quote that I've always loved, is that art is nature filtered through personality. And I guess for me, like, I just like to have the things sitting in the studio that I can observe it and sort of participate with it and filter it my own way, than having the camera be one step in between me and that. There are times that I will use a photo. I mean, if it's something, oh, here we go. That's the actual painting. Which was super Chihuahua. But I am gonna talk about photos. So again, I think I was just kind of flipping through collage paintings, and I have some more coming up of UFOs, but and I painted a lot of bacon, which I do paint from life, like we were discussing, and I have like tricks for that. This is bringing home the bacon, obviously, right? This is another inverso where I actually painted, I had a frame that I flipped around and then shoved the collage into the frame. But this is a pretty good example of what I like to paint, because I got to paint a shark with a laser beam strapped to its head. And I figured, like, if I get to do that, I just don't want to paint flowers in a vase. That's really speaks to me.
I'm with you.
Right? Yeah, I mean, like, let's paint the shark with the laser beam. Another series that I've done is comic book stuff, and these do get a little racy, just gonna tell you. But they're fun for me because I really love, I kind of love the snark in these. This one I got a lot of trouble with when I posted on Instagram, and I'm like, no, I like Basquiat, like you're kind of missing the point with that. But they're fun. Karen didn't know much about modern art, but she knew what it was when she saw it. So I enjoy these. I love text. I'm like this close to just taking a Sharpie and just writing on my painting. Like, I really love text. Anytime that I can use text or a title or words, I really enjoy that. Scrabble tiles have become a really big thing for me. I will stick a Scrabble tile in just about anything right now. I've done a lot of toast paintings. I have another PowerPoint where I show you like 22 toast paintings, which I didn't think anybody wanted to see, but I've done a lot of toast paintings. That is probably the only time that I make something up. I do actually have toast in the studio set up, but I will make a scale. Like, I will burn several pieces of Wonder Bread, so I have dark to light, so I can kind of pick and choose. I really have a value scale toast across the top, because I don't have like a Darth Vader toaster. But they're fun. This is an inverso. I love doing the backs of these. It's just super fun for me. I always try to have a quote or a photo or some kind of narrative going on. This was really cute with the octopus. I really love that octopus. Another thing that I've started doing lately are these box paintings. I showed you one with the apple. And they are just cradled panels. They're like 2 inches deep. They're like, everybody's seen those at the art supply store. I like to paint the side so it looks like a cardboard box. And, you know, well, maybe the pomegranate is not super narrative. Like, the stamps for me are, like, I try to always put stamps on the side that sort of connect. A little racy, but, you know, I think these are really fun. I think a lot of bird's nests too. I was gonna just show you I'm gonna show you later a step-by-step of this. But this is a commission that I did for a friend of mine who's also an artist, an amazing artist. And we just collaborated on the sides, you know, just things that were important to her with the setup. This was one of the first ones I did where I got real wild. I'm like, oh, we're gonna have stamps all over it. So I've kind of dialed that back. I don't get quite as well with all those stamps now. So we'll go through just kind of my training and studies. I studied with a lot of people before I found my teacher. This is Michael Aviano. I like to say he's the most famous art teacher you've never heard of. So he was very active as a portrait painter in the 70s and 80s with Grand Central. He taught New York for many, many years at Grand Central as well. You probably, if you have not heard of Michael, you may have heard of some of his students. Graydon Parrish was one of his students, John DeMartin, Nielsen Carlin, me. He didn't really love working with galleries and putting himself out there commercially. And I think he really loved to just do narrative figure painting. And by the time I met him, he was pretty much just working in his studio. He worked with like Cavalier Galleries in Greenwich for a while and still has a relationship with them. But I had studied a lot of different places. I'd been at the Art Students League, National Academy of Design, just, you know, this was back in the 90s. And like, it was hard to find somebody that could teach representational drawing and painting. You know, nowadays it's pretty awesome. Like, you know, everybody's got an atelier and everybody's teaching cast drawing and copying bark plates, which is amazing. You know, but back in the day, like, it was hard to find that. I got lucky that I had a couple of really good teachers, but I would always hear about Michael. Like, nobody actually knew him. They were like, well, he's kind of reclusive, he lives on the Upper Side, he only takes like 4 or 5 students. It was like a unicorn. Like you'd hear about him, nobody knew him. Eventually, I finally met someone who studied with him and I kind of got my foot in the door with Michael. But I did a 6-year apprenticeship with him and he really taught me pretty much everything I know about drawing and painting. And really changed the course of my life. But this is a self-portrait that he did around the time that I was studying with him. This is one of his figure paintings, and you can tell this is not anything like what I do. So, you know, I still think like sometimes people will want to take a workshop with me and they're like, well, you know, you paint Trompe. I don't really think like you can help me paint flowers. I'm like, I can help you paint flowers. But I mean, I think this is kind of that thing where like I learned so much from him, even though I knew I was going to be a still life and Trompe painter, but these are just gorgeous. He very much was inspired by Rembrandt and just a beautiful figure painter. This is one of his florals. And you can see that first floral that I showed you is very much me sort of emulating Michael's style. They're just very beautiful, really a painter's painter. But basically I studied with him for 6 years. The first almost 3 years, I did nothing but monochrome painting, which I know everybody's like, oh my God, it's so horrible. But the good news about that is, you know, when you take color out of the equation, you take drawing out of the equation, when you're just learning about value and paint handling, this can be a great way to learn. And I think I actually learned skills and a toolbox for solving problems really quickly this way. We just did a lot of stuff like this. It was a lot of studies. It was a lot of note taking. It was nomenclature. It was understanding form. You know, there were step by step in this program, and you finished each thing before you moved on to the next one. I think in the course of the monochrome and color painting, I think I painted something like 208 spheres. Got really good at spheres. But this was so valuable for me. This was like a different forms of lighting study where you have a cast and a sphere set up and you're lighting them different ways just to see how the light's going to behave in different situations. You know, do you want rim light, side light, form light? What does that look like? I'm sure everybody has seen these. This is so old. Looks like I covered this with syrup. But everybody has probably painted these casts of Michelangelo's David, these features. The cast painting for me was really great. I'd spent a lot of time previously doing cast drawing, which I found not to be as helpful. I mean, cast drawing and working with charcoal can be a really great precursor for pressure using a brush. Like I get that, I get it. But for me, this was just more immediate. I got to learn paint handling, got to learn turning the form, I got to learn value, taking color off the table. I think I really improved a lot faster. There was a lot of note taking, as I mentioned. So we would sit in class and copy notes. And I have hundreds of pages of notes that were recopied and put into plastic sleeves that I'm now trying to scan and like put together. But it was a lot of that. And I ended up doing his drawing program, monochrome painting, color, composition, floral painting. I think I did all of those. So I think we're gonna have a break.
Yeah, next,
We're almost there.
no,
These are just
98,
98.
this was 89.
Okay, these are just 2 color wheels that I wanted to show you guys. I am going to talk a little bit about Munsell color theory after the break. But that was probably the greatest thing that I learned from Michael. Michael had been a student of Riley's at Art Students League. Riley was a big time illustrator in New York and kind of developed his own version of color theory based on the Munsell system. That's also Munsell, where everything is laid out in value. This was another study that we did that I will talk about later, but where you learn how to control the pulls of color, you know, by observing an actual sphere. You know, it's like, I always tell my students, like with a lemon, it's like, well, you know, if you can paint the sphere, you can paint the lemon because it's the same concept. So we did a lot of that. This is another chroma reduction study. I'm going to talk a little bit about that with color as well. But basically it's based on chroma retention, where you have the fullest expression of chroma, you can always neutralize it. You know, but you can't go the other way. You know, it's like once you have this very neutral pile of paint, it's hard to goose up chroma if you don't have a very chromatic expression. So this is just a way to neutralize with a neutral instead of by complement. This was the first thing I ever painted in color with Michael. This was like year 4. I finally got to paint a lemon. I mean, right? And I look at this now, I'm like, oh my God, like I couldn't have softened that cast shadow because it's hideous. But, you know, after all of that studying with him and doing all those exercises, this is the first thing I painted in color. I was very excited and very nervous because it was like, oh, I'm finally gonna paint a thing in color. But I painted this literally a year later. And all this was another still life study that was done with 2 colors. It's just blue and orange, purple, blue, yellow, orange, and a neutral string. So this was like my graduation from still life. We still had to do a self-portrait on this other set. But I did it really fast because like I had spent the time and learned the tools and techniques that I needed. So it's like for me to go from the lemon to this thing was pretty quick. Okay, now we're gonna do the break. I do make all of my own panels. Because basically when I'm composing something, I'll make a collage and I don't really think about what size it is or any of that. I'm just building the collage. Once I know that and I have a drawing, then I actually cut the panels. So I end up with some very funky sizes, some ones that are like 22.5 by 14.75, because that just seems to fit the composition the best. So I tend to do it that way rather than be like, well, I have an 11 by 14 panel. Let's see if I can like make this thing fit. So it's a little different that way. I do like to paint on MDF, which is a horrible idea and you really shouldn't do that. But I've done it for 30 years and I love MDF. And I seal it with shellac and then I do a toned oil ground that I brush on, I let it cure, I stipple it out, and then I polish it with a 400 wet dry sandpaper. And I can make that thing like glass. I can make it super smooth. That is my favorite texture to paint on. I've made a lot of these panels for friends of mine. Nobody likes them. They're like, it's like an ice skating rink, but I love it. And I do make all of my own stuff.
Is that
Painting?
Is that a painting?
No, that's no. It's not a painting. That is me. With the circular saw. Yeah, that is me being super glamorous. No. I do make a very simple drawing for transfer. I don't make pretty drawings. They're not like shaded. They're very simple line drawings. It's just the bare minimum of information that I need to get it on the panel. A lot of stuff I find later as I'm painting. Like, I really just want landmarks, big shapes. I don't need a whole lot of information. I will trace if it's a flat thing like a collage. I mean, I know I can draw it. I don't need to spend the time to actually draw the thing. You know, if I can speed things up to trace, I will. I will cheat any chance that I get. But this is another little box painting that I did that was painted from life, and like there's no cheating or tracing there. Actually had to draw all the bubbles in the bubble wrap. But again, I do very simple transfer drawings.
Okay, here comes the next.
Here comes the video.
Let me go down here. And that wasn't. What do I mean? That's what. So this one is number 3. And I want to go. This would be.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I know.
It's the process.
It's the process. Here it is over here, and then we do. Oops, and it didn't do it.
Oh,
I think we should move the candy bar, because we keep.
It's like a surprise for me. I'm like, which one is it gonna be? This was,
Let me start at the beginning.
Okay. this is me sort of setting something up from the beginning. This is an inverso painting. And let's see if it comes back.
This puts you on the wrong page. I'll get the hang of it by the time we're done.
I know, I feel bad. I know, I made this like extra.
Okay, here we go.
So this is a real painting my grandmother did. And I loved the back of it. It's the original masking tape from the 60s. So it is like really old and like it's amazing. I keep it in a special box. But it was a real painting, and I actually set this up in the studio. I painted one of the walls in my studio that weird green gray color that I like, and like I crinkle everything up. I actually spend quite a bit of time arranging it. Like I don't just stick a piece of tape up there, like I move it and I pick the edge and I make sure the cast shadow is just right. Blocking in, I'll use like a really big fat brush. That's like a number 8 hog bristle, right? That's not like everybody thinks my work is detailed. I must be using like these little tiny, and I do use tiny brushes, like there's one. But when I'm blocking things in, I do use a really large brush. So this is the pullback that shows you the final painting. And they're just super fun. We were talking a little bit earlier about painting from life. And for me, like, I really like to see the thing. Like, I like to experience it and sort of filter it my own way. It is. Yeah, so that's.
You just can't move your head though.
My chair does not have wheels on it. Like, I see in one spot. And when I find that where that really matters though, is when you paint shiny stuff. Like if I'm painting like a tinfoil UFO or like a shiny ball. I was painting a magic 8-ball last year, and it took me almost a day to realize, like I kept seeing this orange thing in the ball, and I'm like, what is that? My arm? Is it my shirt? Like what's reflecting into the ball? It was my easel. When I would move the easel up and down. Anyway, that's not part of the PowerPoint. But when you paint, yeah, what is the next one? Oh, this is the whole painting from life thing. We were talking a little bit about photos. I do set everything up so you can see earlier we had that pomegranate sitting in a box. They fall apart really quickly. I mean, like they turn black almost immediately. So I do always have photo reference for something like that. And I will have a whole pomegranate sitting out as well to model the outside. I leave it set up in the box rotting, even though it is super nasty. That's just me varnishing it. People love these videos on Instagram, so I thought I would throw one up here. They get really confused because when I varnish them, I put them on a paint can, so I can do the sides and the top at the same time. And this blows everybody's mind because it looks like it's floating, and I'm like, I'm not doing, oh, can we stop?
Yeah, we went to the wrong one.
I do want to explain this one though. We can probably skip the rest of these.
So what are you looking for?
Can we stop that?
Can we stop that? Oh, yeah, if I can find it.
That comes way later. This is how we do oil transfers. I have a whole thing on oil transfers. I just wanted to run through quickly.
See, I can't see around you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, now then, we want to go to the beginning. So
Well, I just want to go back to the PowerPoint. Yeah, those.
If I go to the beginning and decides to go somewhere.
Oh, I don't
There we
actually.
go.
Can we go back to the PowerPoint?
Yeah. Of course. Very easy.
You mean now?
Right now, you mean?
Would you varnish with shellac?
No. I make the panels with shellac. I seal the MDF with shellac. Yeah, that's part of my panel making process.
On
No.
the.
I use MDF and I seal it with a coat of shellac, and then I put an oil ground on top of that. The MDF is just acts as the shellac acts as a primer for the MDF and seals it.
I see.
Oh, there's that's.
There are lots of different fiber boards available to paint on. There's a high density fiber board, masonite, MDF. They're all like engineered. There's pros and cons to every sort of substrate. MDF definitely has its disadvantages. Are we back where we were? I think we're gonna just skip the rest of all these videos because I think it's getting fussy.
Yeah,
We'll just do PowerPoint.
I can put this over here. And if I move. It's very strange.
There you go.
All right, we can watch this.
We don't need to watch this.
Oh, we don't wanna watch.
Well, this is out of order, but while we have it up, and then I think we'll just scrap the rest of these, because it's kind of hard. I'm gonna do explain about oil transfers here, but this is actually how I make them. So. Oil transfer is basically where you're making a sheet of paper with oil paint on it, like mimeograph paper, if you're old enough to remember that stuff. It's exactly the same idea. So you could go ahead and play that.
Oh.
But basically I do that with burnt umber. And I scumble it onto a piece of tracing paper that is the same size as my drawing. I take the drawing down, I slide the paper under, so it is wet side down against it, and then I use pressure to transfer. And I have a little thing in the PowerPoint, and I'll show you why that is so useful. But there's lots of different ways to get a drawing onto a panel. This is my favorite one. And it's very simple. It's just a little burnt umber, and I use like a chip brush, and it's just like very lightly done on a piece of paper, so it's super sheer. I'm gonna hold it up here and you can see through it how sheer it is and how dry. And it is just a pressure transfer. So I slip it underneath, I retrace the drawing, and I transfer the line that way. And you can use lots of different things. I generally just use a pencil. If I'm doing something very fine, very intricate, I might use a stylus because it's gonna have a smaller needle. Pencil, but yeah, this is a great way to transfer a drawing. Because once it's dry, the line doesn't go anywhere. The important thing is not to pull your drawing off until you have checked it. I always forget at least some part of my drawing. But yeah, I love doing it this way, because if I transfer it and I don't like it, which happens, I pull it off and it's like, God, you know what, it's just like a half an inch too close to the edge. I wipe it off and just do it again. You know, and that's why I don't actually do this technique on the back of my drawing. Because sometimes I do that. We'll just like burn through the PowerPoint instead of. Okay, that was a.
These are the ones you didn't see.
These are the ones you didn't see. This is a pomegranate rotting. Oil transfer, how and why. So that is how I put them. That is how I actually do that oil transfer with burnt umber. And here's why I like to do that. This is a bird's nest, and this is what the oil transfer looks like. And I just want you to notice how simple that drawing is. Like those are just landmarks and anchors for that nest. Like there is not a lot going on, because I'm going to find that as I paint. So I don't need to try to draw every little stick. This is how I blocked it in. And I just want to show you this with the nest for the light and shade, and then this in close up, because where this is super useful. I had just scumbled that paint over that line drawing, and it hasn't gone anywhere. You know, it's once that burnt umber is dry, it's stuck. So I can go in and scumble with like a big hog's hair brush, just rubbing in value, because I know with that nest, the most important thing is going to be to keep the form in the light and shade, right? Because that's going to I know that's going to want to get away from me, because I'm going to get involved in all the little sticks and twigs. And I'm going to forget about the big form. So this gives me a chance to do that. I can kind of start to refine it. This is more of a second pass, you know, still very rough, where I'm starting to draw things in, and I'm looking for those landmarks that have light and shade. You know, some of those twigs actually turn the form. The interesting thing about a bird's nest, and this is an approach to form, there are two approaches to form. There's form, and I like to think of this with flowers. There's like a tulip that's like a cone, and it turns and it's round and it has form. And then there's a flower like a peony, and that's made of little tiny pieces, and that's a mosaic. That's the word that I use for it, is mosaic. So a bird's nest is sort of the balance in between the two. Like with the peony, you have all these little pieces of paint that are going to combine to make a whole and to make form as separate units. That's a little bit what happens with the nest. Like I'm not going to paint every single twig, but I am going to try to find the accent points in between the shadows. I'm going to try to find landmarks, and the rest of it is just kind of confetti. That's the finished painting. But you can tell I have really made an effort to stay with the light and shade of that nest and not get caught up in all the twigs. And that is why I like an oil transfer. This is something I talk a lot about. I know this is grainy, it's horrible close up with my iPhone. But as far as like a first pass and indirect painting layers, I do paint in layers. So I'm gonna probably, when I blocked that in, it was just a square, you know, and then for the first pass, I'm gonna start defining some things. I'm gonna draw in some shadow shapes. I'm gonna try to figure out where things go. I'm not really going in for the dark values yet. That's gonna come later. And then in the second pass, I'm gonna start redefining things. I'm gonna add a cast shadow. I'm gonna add my darks, my highlights, and really try to create the form. This is another thing I wanted to show you guys, because like, I don't like completely slavishly copy my model. You know, I've made a lot of changes here. I really felt like I wanted to, this with the model, this is an old napkin. And you know, you could see through it and it was too dark and too gray. So like, I am perfectly happy to change stuff. If I want it to be warmer or brighter, I might make that change. I'm not copying every single little thing in the embroidery, but I am trying to give it a feel for that. You know, it's like that it feels like the fabric and it feels like the texture. It doesn't have to be exactly copied, you know, which I think does happen a lot with when people work from photos is, you know, they're trying to transfer this much information to the painting, and that's cool if you really want high resolution. But I guess I kind of feel like I don't need my work to be that high resolution to communicate napkin. So I did want to show you guys that I will make changes and I will make executive decisions on what I want to paint and what I don't want to paint. What you leave out is just as important as what you put in. Like, I think sometimes people think, oh, I just need more detail. And usually it's exactly the opposite. You know, leaving something for the viewer to finish is really important. You know, I always say like adding more realism does not make it more realistic. Lots of times it's what you don't have in there, what you do edit out can be super helpful. So I did have to learn all the French terms for painting from Michael. So a boche is the fancy word for a block end. And I used that once in a painting form and they made fun of me. So I don't do that anymore, but I'm gonna just show you quickly, step by step, how I would block something in. This is something that I find students struggle with, is actually just getting like that first pass in and what it should look like. Really, I use really thin paint. I don't paint with solvent. So all of my paint is pretty much controlled by paint load and paint pressure. So I'm using very thin paint. I'm knocking everything down. I'm keeping any kind of topography, brush stroke, anything out of this. I do like paint. Like when I've actually finished a painting, there's paint on the painting. It's not perfectly smooth, but that's a choice that I make. It's not like a default because I use too much paint in the first pass and then I have to compensate for it. But this is just, I'm just going through it simply, just blocks of color, very simply laying bands in. I get such a kick out of this UFO because when I block it in, it's just a big gray blob. Like that's all I need. I know I'm going to make it look like tinfoil later, but for now, I just need to put something down and get going. And you can see with the candy the same way. It's very simple. That's the UFO. Very simple block in. I know I'm going to find all those shapes, redefine everything, find the lights, the darks, everything that's happening with that later. But just to start, I just need something down there. Same with the cotton ball. I don't need to put all that light form, not to start. I just need the basic shape of things. And that's how the final painting comes. This is the same. Now, we did have a video of this where it goes really fast at the end. But this is the same thing where I'm just kind of moving around, putting in the cast shadow, building the form. I did do a music note thing here, but that's something that I saved for the very end. Which really great, close up and scary, but that was that piece. This is the video of that, which we're not going to do. And I did just bring a couple of images of that painting while I was working on it. And I actually really did set that up, and that fabric, I had to like soak it in glue and like pin it and nail it and let it dry. It was really kind of crazy to set up. This is something that I do talk to students about with overlay ornament, which can be kind of fun. Anytime I'm doing text or overlay ornament, I paint the substrate completely. Like I modeled that entire gown and then I went back and put the ornament on top of it so that it follows the planes and value changes. Same way if I have like a crumpled up piece of paper with text on it, I paint the paper and then I put the text on top of that follows the planes and value changes. And that's what makes it look like it's part of the paper. This is a technique that I use called ghosting, and that's done with an oil transfer. So again, oil transfer. So, yeah. Whereas I would have transferred the line for that, painted over it with the substrate, and then gone back in and found that in detail as a final pass. And y'all can see this, I don't even need to show you this. But isn't it horrible? Like, this is why it's so nice for people to be able to see work. Like, I had this professionally shot and it doesn't look mirrors where, like, the painting just always looks so much better. And I just wanted to blow through 3 minutes, color theory. Just a quick thing about Munsell. This was probably the coolest thing that I learned from Michael. Munsell, if you don't know, is just a way to talk about color so that we're all on the same page. It just gives a language to talk about hue, value, and chroma. It's made up of 3 parts: hue, value, chroma, which value is in the middle. Chroma is the saturation, which is that little wedge there. Like, how saturated is it? How neutral is it? And hue is what color is it, which goes around the outside. Munsell was a guy from Boston, and he came up with this. He published it, I think, around 1907. It actually still has a very he wanted to give everybody a language to describe hue, value, and color simply. You know, rather than talk about things being warm or cool, which is very subjective, we would talk about that with a number, like it's a value 8 or a value 9, and the chroma is an 11, and the hue is yellow, orange, orange. So it would be very specific. They still use Munsell today to do stuff like soil samples. They catalog soil samples using Munsell because it's very clear what it is. Baking cookies, all the Chips Ahoy cookies that come out, they want them all to look the same and have the same hue, value, and chroma. That exercise was basically Munsell. This is another thing I wanted to show you as well, as far as using Munsell to paint that lemon, where you have a string of colors and then you're plugging those colors in, and it's really based on what that sphere looks like, using a hard and soft lay-in. This is sort of a typical palette. I do put everything out in terms of value. Sometimes I'll abbreviate things. I won't put the entire string out. I think this day I was probably painting red and green peppers. So I almost always have a neutral across the bottom and an orange string and a blue. And with that, with a couple of auxiliaries, there's a lot that I can paint. I mean, in a weird way, even though this is laid out with Munsell, it's a lot like the Eaton color wheel, just the primaries, where I've got red, blue, green, orange. That's a purple blob up in the corner. So it's very serviceable. And this is just a quick thing that I do on color theory sometimes, but the reason that I like Munsell is that it is reliable and repeatable. I remember being in class with other artists, and we were painting a portrait, and like they had like this halftone and they couldn't match it again. You know, they're like trying to save it in tinfoil, and I'm like, should probably just be able to match it. So that is one thing I do like about Munsell, is that it's easy to match the colors over and over again. Knowing what they're going to do matters. Anytime I get a new color, I'll make a little swatch. You know, I'll try mixing it out with other things just so I know what it looks like. Chroma retention is really important. You can always make it more neutral, but having the highest chroma possible is really a good thing. You know, it's like the amplifier and Spinal Tap. Like, as long as you have 11, you can always turn it down. That is why all of my paints are based on chroma retention. Like, the paints that I use aren't based on brand. They're more based on what's the most chromatic expression of that hue. So I have like all different brands. I've got Gumbacher, I've got Gamblin, I have Winsor Newton, I have Michael Harding. This is another thing that I hear, and I know I'm so close to him. Overworking paint. This is just a thing about blocking in and understanding modeling factors. It goes back to those spheres with a hard and a soft lay-in, is that you're laying things in bands and then softening. Like these two spheres up at the top, those are both laid in bands and then soften together. And this is it. This is the end. These are the 3 things that Michael always used to tell me to think about when I was painting. Value, is it lighter or darker? What color is it? And chroma, how saturated or neutral is it? And I still think about this all the time when I paint, but I have those 3 things in mind. You can really figure out a lot of stuff for yourself that way, I found. I am on Instagram. Like, this is a really good way to connect with me. I love Instagram. I post almost every day. So like, if you were on Instagram, friend me, but send me a DM, because I don't really go through followers and I probably won't know who you are. So just be like, hey, I met you. You came and talked to BAA. And I do have a website and newsletter. But the newsletter thing is not that scary because I'm not organized to send it out more than a few times a year. But I do have one of those and it has stuff on it. So yeah. It's 8:30. It's 8:30.
I think there's time for a few questions.
Sure.
If people have them.
Yeah.
The pain that you, you were doing, with the paper and all, how long does it take you to go through that whole process? Is it weeks or?
It depends on what it is. You know, it's like, most of my stuff takes between 2 and 3 weeks. Some quicker, you know, it's really based on size and complexity.
We'll say box envelopes for example.
That took 40 days. Yeah, I keep a list. I don't keep a list of how many hours because that would be really depressing and I would find out that like if I worked at Wendy's through the drive-through, I would make more money. So I don't actually want to know that, but I do keep a very organized calendar in my studio of each month and I write down what I do every day and because basically I'm trying to reverse engineer a show. So like the show is here, so everything has to be varnished and shipped and I have to order my frames. I have to make, you know, it's so I can see it coming. But I do write down what I do every day. Because I want to know when I finish something, when it's going to be dry enough to varnish. So, yeah.
My question was about the varnishing. We saw a little snapshot where everybody thinks it's levitating because we have it lifted. So you varnish after you're done painting.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Varnish is a tricky thing. That is probably the most asked question I get on Instagram is about varnish. Like weirdly. Yeah, there are a lot of different commercial varnishes around. Right now I'm using a Regal Res, which is like a synthetic varnish and every varnish has its plus and minuses. Like Regal Res tends to be very soft, but it's also easily removable. You know, years ago I was using like Damar, you know, that kind of thing. Like Regal Res I like because it's enough to just sink in the varnish. I think there's sort of a thing, varnish is really just more about sinking in and protecting. I think sometimes people think it's like polyurethane where it's like, oh, I have sealed it and now I can like, it's a very soft thing. You know, it's not a protection. Like I can't tell you how many things I've gotten back that have been scratched. Like it doesn't protect from that. The one that I'm using right now that I really love is a Regal Res and it's made by a guy in New Jersey, Conservators Products, and it comes in gloss and matte, and you can mix it together to make a custom finish, which is why I like it. Gamvar is also a Regal Res, which probably a lot of people, you guys have experience with. I used Gamvar for years, but I had some things go wrong, so I'm on Conservators Products now, which what I like about Conservators Products is I can make it as matte or glossy as I want. So I have control that way. Yes.
The lettering, what's the breadth of the readers?
A little one. I have a couple of reels on Instagram with the brush, like me doing that step by step, and I have a lot of stuff like that on there. But there are two that I really love. One is a Winsor Newton Scepter Gold 2 Series 101 round in a 000 and a 400, and they're awesome little brushes. The other one that I really love is this is so silly, is the Jerry's Artorama brand, the Ebony Splendor, but I only like the 0 round. Like, I don't like all the other rounds, I just like the 0 round, but that is like my workhorse brush. Like when that goes on sale, I buy them like I'll buy like 50 at a time. It's my favorite brush because those are super useful. Like when they are pointy and new, they're incredible for doing fine detail work, but then, you know, as you use them, they get splayed and they kind of fall apart and they're disgusting, but they're perfect for blending in small areas. Like I have like hundreds of those in the studio, but that's a good one and it's cheap. Anybody else?
Has anyone ever tried to do Trompe with watercolor?
Yeah.
I've
Oh,
never
yeah.
seen any.
I have a friend, Alyssa Shea, who does, yeah, it's definitely Trompe. Yeah, she lives on Long Island. She's an amazing painter. I mean, I think watercolor is really, really hard. So, you know, there's that. But yeah, I've seen some incredible stuff in water media that's like very high definition realism. You should check out Alyssa. She's awesome.
You have any shows coming up in this area?
No, I don't think so. I just finished all my big stuff for the year. Sometimes I show on the Cape. Occasionally I have a piece of the art at the Providence Art Club. Most of my galleries tend to be sort of far flung. My big gallery is in Santa Fe and I do a solo show with them every year. So that's kind of where all my work ends up, is out in the desert.
How'd you cross paths with Alice Cooper?
He has a friend, a girl that I went to school with, plays golf with him. And that is how we connected. He loves to play golf, like they live in Scottsdale and play golf together.
Some of your stuff had a Frida Kahlo feel to it with hearts popping out of chests and things. Is that
Oh, I love like,
connection that way, or is that just coincidence?
I don't know if it's Frida so much as it's, I've done a lot of stuff with like human hearts lately, like anatomical human hearts being ripped out. I don't know, it's just a weird metaphor. Like it's been in my work a lot lately. I actually just painted a human heart wrapped in bubble wrap in a box. So yeah, I don't know.
Do you ever pick up this cello?
No, I don't. That's kind of like, I was at such a high level with that. Like, you know, it's like if you don't practice for a week or two, it's okay. But like once you've gone like a month or 6 months, or like you really start to lose the muscle memory. And like the times that I would go back and pick it up were so depressing, because like I was not, you have to practice to stay. And it just, for me, I was just done. I was like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm gonna move on. So, you know, now that I'm older, I'm like, you know, it would have been fun, I guess, if I kept that up to like play string quartets on the weekend or something. But like at the time, I just needed like cold turkey. So no, I'm not sure I could tune one now, actually.
You could paint one.
I could paint one. I would be down with that. That sounds fun. That sounds fun.
With a heart.
With a heart coming out of it.
Yeah. On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you.